Hi guys, today in this video we'll be building a workflow which reads data from a file and loads into a relational table. Let's go ahead and see what other things we'll be learning in this session. Here in this session we'll be learning how to work with a flat file data source, and then we'll be learning how to work with the lookup transformation and filter transformation. Okay, let's go ahead and see what's the mapping we are going to create in this session. Here we will be building a mapping which reads data from the customer file and loads the data into a relational target table. While we are loading the data into the target table, we will be filtering out any customer information which is already existing in the customer database. Okay, and the source table is going to be a flat file, and our target table is going to be a relational target table, and the transformation we are going to use will be lookup and filter transformation. Okay, with that, let's go to the Power Designer and start building our mapping. I'm logged on to the Power Designer using my user ID and password, and as a first step, let's go ahead and create the source definition. Okay, before we create the source definition, let's look at the source file. This is the definition of our source file. So if you look at here, we can clearly see that it's a fixed width file, and you can see that we have information like the customer ID, company name, address, then we have the city, state, and the zip code. Okay, now let's go to the Power Designer and build the source definition. Okay, for that, let's go to source analyzer, go to sources menu and import from flat file. Now choose the sample file or data file, click on OK. We know that the source file is a fixed width file, so I'm going to choose this option, and I'm going to choose this option to select the name of the columns in the first record. Okay, once that is done, you can go to next, and you can identify each column by fixing the width of each column. Just click here, so it's going to set a marker there and identify that as the end of the first column. Then scroll to the right, and here you can see that this is the end of the next column. Click on here to set the next marker, go to the right again, click on here, set the marker, do the same thing for all the rest of the columns. So once all the markers are set, click on next. Now here you can see that each column has been identified and the column names have been chosen from the first record. Okay, so we can just scan through each column and see if it has properly identified the column names and the length, precision, and the data type. So seems to be everything is fine. Click on finish. Okay, now you can see that the source definition has been created in the source analyzer. Okay, now the next step is going to be create the target definition. For that, let's go to the target designer. Since the definition of our target is same as our source definition, what we can do is like go to the repository navigator and choose your source definition, click on it and drag it to the target designer. Now you can see that the target definition has been created and it has the same name and same structure as the source definition. Now do a double click and open it for the edit mode, and I'm going to do a rename, and I'm going to set the database type as Microsoft SQL Server. Okay, click on apply. Okay, since this target table is not existing in my database, I'm going to create the script and run the script to create the target definition in my database. For that, go to target, generate SQL, connect to my database, connect, now generate and execute. Okay, here you can see that the SQL has been processed. Okay, now we have created the source definition and target definition, and the next step is going to be creating a mapping. For that, go to the mapping designer, click on mapping, create. I'm going to give the name, click on OK. Now I'm going to pull the source definition. So it has created the source and the source qualifier. As per the requirement, we'll be loading only the customer information which is not existing in the customer database table. Okay, for that we'll have to look into the customer database table based on the customer ID and see if the customer is already existing. Okay, for this purpose we'll be using the transformation called lookup. Okay, using the lookup transformation you will be able to look into a relational table or a flat file, and we can see if the record is already existing or not. If the record is existing, you will be able to pull the information about the complete record. Okay, let's go ahead and create the lookup transformation here. For that, go to transformations, create, and choose the lookup transformation. Okay, I'm going to give the name as LKP underscore customer. Click on create. Now it's going to ask you for the definition of your lookup table. Okay, so here you have the option to choose the definition either from the source definition or from the target, or you can use the definition of the table from the source qualifier itself. If the definition of your lookup table is not available either in the source, target, or in the source qualifier, you can pull the information either from the relational table or the flat file. Okay, so I'm going to import it from the database. So I'm going to put import from the relational table, give the ODBC connection, user ID, and password. Click on connect and choose the customers table from the table list. Okay, and click on OK. Done. Now the lookup transformation has been created and it has imported the definition of the lookup table from the relational table. We will be doing the lookup to the customer table using the customer ID. Okay, so I am going to pull the customer ID column from the source qualifier to the lookup transformation. So now let's go ahead and see the properties of the lookup transformation. For that, do a double click and open in the edit mode. Okay, if you go to the transformation tab, you can see the properties like any other transformation, and if you go to the ports tab, you can see all the ports which we import from the customer table, and you can see the port which we just mapped from the source qualifier. Okay, and you can see that the data type, precision, and the scale, and you can see the input port, output port. Okay, now we can see a new port called lookup port. This will be the column which we are going to use to do the lookup on. That means these are the columns which we'll be using to match the data and pull the information from, and you can see some extra features here. These features will be used in the advanced level lookup configuration. Okay, now let's go to the condition tab and see what we have in there. Okay, in the condition tab we are going to give the condition or the criteria based on which the lookup is done. Okay, in our case we are going to do the lookup based on the customer ID match. To create the lookup condition, click on the add button, and we are going to do the lookup on the customer ID, and we'll be using the equal operator, and we'll be doing the lookup based on the customer ID which is coming from the source qualifier. Okay, if you need to have the additional conditions, you can click on the add button and give more conditions. Okay, now let's go to the properties tab and see some of the properties. Okay, since we are doing a lookup onto the relation table, here we have the capability to give a SQL override. That means you can override the SQL which will be created by Informatica. Okay, if you want to see the SQL which is generated by Informatica, you can click on the generate SQL. If in case you want to modify this SQL, you can just modify the SQL here and do the while date. Since we don't want to use the SQL override, I'm just going to give cancel. Okay, and here you can see the lookup table which we are going to use, and here if you want to filter out the record which is going to be used for the lookup purpose, you can use a lookup filter here. Okay, and this property says that while the session is running, the data from the lookup table will be cached and saved in a cache file. Okay, And here, if in case you are finding multiple matches for a single record in the lookup table, you can specify which value you need to use. For example, if you are using a customer ID 1000 and from the lookup table you are finding 3 records for the same customer ID, in that case you can specify either you need to choose the first value, last value, or report an error, or choose any value from that list. Okay, so I'll use the first value here, and here you have the lookup condition which we just give, and here it is choosing the database connection. It's saying that the lookup is a database table, and there are some other properties which is not relevant for this session. Okay, now let's go back to the ports tab and see some other settings. Here we are doing a lookup to the customer table, and the reason why we are doing a lookup is to identify the customer is already existing or not. Okay, for that purpose we will be pulling only one column from the lookup table. So I'm going to uncheck all these columns. Okay, click on apply and okay, we have created the lookup transformation which looks into the customer table using the customer ID and returns the customer ID. Okay, if the customer ID is already existing in the target table, it's going to give the value for that, and if the customer ID is not existing, it's going to give you a null value. Okay, the next step will be to create a filter transformation. Okay, using this filter transformation we'll be filtering out the records which is already existing in the target table. Okay, let's go to transformation, create, and choose the filter. I'm going to give the name as fil underscore customer, create, and done. You can see the filter transformation has created here. Okay, I'm going to choose all the columns from the source qualifier and drag it to the filter transformation. On top of that, I'm going to choose the customer ID column from the lookup transformation. Okay, so I had chosen that to the lookup transformation because that's a column based on which we are doing the filter. Okay, do a right click and arrange all. Now let's open the filter transformation and see the properties. Okay, in the transformation tab, like any other transformation, it has the transformation name and the description. In the port, there is no properties which we need to change. And in the properties tab, here we can give the filter condition. Okay, to give the filter condition, click on this arrow and open the expression editor. I'm going to give the condition like so. Here in this expression, what I'm saying is, if the customer ID coming from the lookup is null, then pass it onto the target. If the customer ID is not null, then filter out that record. Okay, that means if the customer is existing, filter out, else pass it to the target. Okay, validate the expression, click on OK, apply. Okay, the next step what we need to do here is to pull the target from the repository navigator and map the column. For that, do a right click, auto link by name, and drag everything to the target table. Okay, arrange all. Here we are reading the data from the flat file, and we are doing a lookup to the customer table using the customer ID, and we are going to get the customer ID from the target table if the record is already existing, and we are going to get the null value if the customer ID is not existing. Okay, and we set up the filter to filter out the record which is already existing. Then we are passing the record to the target. Okay, with that we have created the mapping. We can go to the mapping and we have validate. We can see that the mapping is valid. Now go to the repository and save. Now the next step will be to create the workflow. For that, go to the workflow. Okay, and go to the workflows menu here, click on create, give the name of the workflow. Okay, now you can see the start task has been created. Now I'm going to create the session task. Click on here, come back to workspace, click on here. It's going to ask you for the mapping name. Choose the mapping name which you just created. Click on OK. Now let's do a double click and open the session for the edit mode. Go to the mapping tab and go to the source. Here you can see that it's going to read a file, so it's going to use the file reader, and I'm going to set the location of the source file, and the name of the source file is already here. Okay, now let me go to the file properties and set some properties. Okay, click on here and you can see that it's a fixed width file. Go to advanced properties and here you can set the null character, and you can set the code page setting for the file, and you can set the number of rows to be skipped as 1, because we know that the first row of the source file is the column heading. Okay, and I need to check the line sequential file format, because our source file is a line sequential file. Okay, click on OK and OK again. Now go to the target and set the target database connection. Click on here and choose the database connection. Click on OK. Okay, and I'm going to set the load type as normal. Okay, and I'm going to give all the other properties as it is. Okay, now I am going to transformations, and in the lookup transformation I'm going to set the database connection. Okay, using this database connection, lookup is going to connect to the database and get the data from the customer table. Okay, once you choose the database connection, click on OK. Okay, and I do not have to set any other properties. Now click on apply and OK. With that, I have given all the properties what is required in the session. Okay, now let me connect between the start task and the session task. For that, let me go to the link task and connect both the tasks. Okay, do a right click on the session and validate. You can see the session is valid. Go to workflows and do a validate. You can see the workflow is valid. Now go to repository and save. Okay, now the workflow is ready and ready to run. Now you can do a right click and start the workflow. Okay, you can see the execution of the workflow has started here. Now let's go to the workflow monitor and see what's the result. Okay, you can see here the workflow execution has started and succeeded. Okay, and from the property window you can see that it has read 5 records from the source and returned 3 records to the target. Okay, now let's go to the source table and target table and see if our data load is successful. Okay, go to the source file. In the source file we can see that we have 5 records and the customer IDs are 1001, 1002, 3, 4 and 5. Okay, now let's go to the target table and see what's the value in the customer table. We can see that we already have the customer IDs 1001 and 1002. Okay, with that means we should not be having these 2 records in our target table tgt underscore new cust. Let's go ahead and fire a query. Here you can see that we have only 3 records here, and we can see the customer IDs 1001 and 1002 are missing. Okay, that's all guys for this video. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll be able to get the instructions for completing this training session, and you'll be able to get a complete list of training sessions, training manual, student guide and much more information just for fans. Thank you guys once again. See you again for the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.